"Last call," I shouted, ringing a small antique bell hanging on the wall behind the bar. It was midnight, and according to Missouri law, Riley's Tavern had to close at 2:30. "You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here." One guy protested loudly. "Who are you to tell us to leave?" I motioned him over to the bar. "You can leave right now," I said quietly, "or I'll throw you out. And by the way, I'm Tom Larson. I own this place." He started to argue, but when he saw the look on my face and assessed my height, he decided that caution was the better part of valor and quickly left. You can't blame him. At 6 feet 4 inches and 250 pounds, I'm big enough to back up my words. A 3.8-centimeter scar running almost vertically under my right eye also gives me a sinister look. It's the result of a bar fight many years ago when I was young and foolish. Some of my unmarried female friends, as well as a few married ones, say the scar doesn't bother them. One even told me that with my black hair and dark, brooding eyes, the scar gives me a sinister look, and many ladies thought it would cheer me up. I heard the usual objections and requests not to cover it up, but as usual, I ignored them. A wave of last-minute drink orders came in from people who were still celebrating the birthday. When the party started at 6:30, there were 20 or more of them. 2 drunks who had been drinking from 2 glasses got drunk and left. Couples and singles found company and left. Only 4 or 5 of the birthday girl's close friends remained. The friends laughed and had fun. The next day, they would have a terrible hangover. It was a good thing it was Saturday. The birthday girl was in much better shape. In almost 6 hours of partying, she had drunk 3 glasses of Asti Spumante. I placed a fresh glass of the drink in front of her. "I didn't order this," she said, puzzled. "I don't want to drink anymore. I don't know your name." "Tom Lawson," I introduced myself, shaking her hand. I had been serving her friends all evening, but it was no surprise that she didn't know my name. It was her first time at Riley's. "Your friends ordered it. Try it, Rebecca," I suggested. Her friends had been shouting her name all evening, and I would have had to be deaf not to remember it by then. She took a cautious sip and smiled. I filled the glass with soda and added a slice of lime. "Thanks. I don't usually go to bars or drink, but my sister, the one in the red dress who's all over the guy on the dance floor, insisted that I come and celebrate her birthday. She's driving, so I'm stuck here until she's ready to leave. I'm Rebecca Kelly." I'd noticed her all evening for 2 reasons. First, after 2 rounds of drinks, she stepped out of the crowd and sat down at a table by herself. Her sister and a couple of other people came over, trying to drag her onto the dance floor and get her to join the fun, but she just smiled and shook her head. About an hour ago, she walked over to the bar, grabbed a 3rd glass of wine, and sat down on a bar stool. The second reason I noticed her was because she was as cute as a spotted puppy. Rebecca had long brown hair braided into a French braid that fell down her back and big green eyes that sparkled and were full of wonder at the world. In addition to her hair and eyes, she had a few freckles on her nose and cheeks, just enough to look charming. Her father and mother must be tall, I thought. She and her sister must be at least 5 feet 7 inches. "Happy birthday," I said with a smile. "It's on me." "Thanks," she replied with a smile. "I heard you tell a drunk guy that this was your place. I thought it was called Riley's." Looking over her shoulder, I leaned over the bar. "Get off the table if you don't want to pay," I said to the 2 girls who had decided to dance on it. "And put something on." My order was met with good-natured laughter from the 2 men who remained in the group. "You can dance and strip on your car hoods if you want, but I don't have a license for entertainment." Turning to Rebecca, I answered her question. "Yes, this is my bar. When I bought it, it was called Riley's, and I saw no reason to change the name. Riley's sounds better than Lawson's, doesn't it? Besides, I made a promise to the previous owner." "And you promised to keep the name Riley?" Then she blushed and stammered an apology. I'm sorry. It's none of my business. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. I inherited a lot of regular customers and they like the name. But that's not the only reason. It's a long and boring story. Rebecca looked at me for a few seconds and smiled. I'd like to hear it sometime. I responded with a look. If you want to stop by sometime in the evening when you have time, I'll tell you my sad story. I'll even buy the wine. Hey, Becca, her drunk sister called out, approaching the bar. I'd better take you home before you get so drunk you can't walk. With that, she slipped and would have fallen if Rebecca hadn't grabbed her and held her up. Winking at Tom, Rebecca said, Come on, Julie, take me home before I embarrass myself. With the help of the guy Julie had been dancing with, Rebecca escorted her sister to the door. See you soon, Tommy, Rebecca said as she left the bar. She may be tall, but she's not skinny, I thought. Rebecca had a strong, athletic body, but when she walked toward me or away from me, there was no doubt that she was a woman. She had curves in all the right places. I turned to the people who were still in the bar. You have time while I go around the bar, collect empty glasses, and finish my drinks, I said. By the time I reached the tables, everyone was waving goodbye. Thanks to it being mid-June and daylight saving time, the bar was flooded with sunlight when the door opened. I looked up when the bar patrons began to complain about the bright light. Riley's bar was dim but not dark, so patrons could find an oasis from the sunlight or streetlights and the stress of everyday life. Rebecca quickly closed the door, smiled, and said, Sorry. She walked over to the bar and sat down on a stool next to the counter. I smiled back at her. Welcome. Would you like some company? It's not very busy today. How about that table? She asked, nodding toward the 6 men. They were the only other patrons in my establishment. Serving beer every 40 minutes doesn't count as company. Smiling, she reminded Tom, You promised to buy me wine and tell me how you became the owner of Riley's. I came here for what I'm owed. I hadn't expected her to take my promise seriously. At best, I had hoped she would return to see me, but not to hear this story. I poured her a glass of wine. Thanks, Rebecca said. Now tell me. I paused for a few seconds, thinking about what to say. Well, I worked here when I was in college. After I graduated, I got a job, worked for a while, and then came back. I had been working here for about a year when Riley said he wanted to retire and help me buy the place. That was a little over 3 years ago. How old are you, 30-something? Rebecca asked. You couldn't have worked in this field for long. So what is it, really? 32, I replied. For some reason, I didn't mind that a virtual stranger wanted to know about my life. I felt that it wasn't just morbid curiosity, but genuine interest. It's a story without a happy ending. In fact, if you want to know the truth, it's pretty depressing. Are you sure you want to hear my sad story? You promised. I had to admit that I wanted to get to know Rebecca better. After looking at her for about 10 seconds, I made up my mind. I graduated from Washington University here in St. Louis. If it weren't for a scholarship and a few grants, I wouldn't have been able to attend this expensive university. In any case, I took advantage of the help and earned a degree in business administration. Then I got a good job at a local company and started climbing the corporate ladder. One of the men at the table went to the bar to order more beer. I paused my story to take his order and returned to Rebecca. I was moving up the career ladder quickly, but after 6 years I became disillusioned and quit. I spent so much time at work that I had virtually no personal life, and I saved most of my salary. My expenses were minimal: rent, utilities, and food. Hell, I didn't even have a car. I lived 3 blocks from the office and walked to work even in the winter. When I quit, I had enough money to live on for 3 or 4 years before I had to look for a job, but I needed something to keep me busy, so I decided to go back to Riley's. This time, one of the men ordered 6 shots of Jack Daniels. I poured them and helped the guy carry the shots to their table. I went back to Rebecca. I filled her glass with wine and continued. As I was saying, I worked for Riley almost full-time for about a year. Then he decided to move to Arizona to be closer to his son and grandchildren. I gave him a large down payment, and Riley worked out a payment schedule that worked for everyone. Such a nice tavern must have cost a lot. It's amazing you were able to save that much in 6 years. Laughing, I replied, I told you Riley gave me a great discount. I gave him $50,000 as a down payment and $2,500 a month. How many months? Rebecca blushed and added, I'm sorry, that's none of my business. Riley was 70 when he retired. I'll pay him $2,500 a month for the rest of his life. I shook my head and laughed again. That old rascal will probably live to be 100. Rebecca laughed with me. Okay, so that's how you acquired the tavern, but why did you leave a good job? That's a story for another time, young lady. Is that a polite way of telling me to mind my own business? No. It's a way of telling you that I need to get to know you better before I go into details. Rebecca reached across the bar and took my hand. Well, let's start somewhere. How about dinner later, when you're done here? The bar's closing, I called to the group at the table. Finish up and go home. But it's only 11, one of the men grumbled. You usually work until 2:30. I'm required by law to close at 2:30, but the law doesn't say I have to stay until then, I replied. I'll buy you a last round, but drink up and go home. Tom and Rebecca went to a small family restaurant next door. Carmine's usually closed at 11, but Tom knew the owners, Pete and Teresa, and they made an exception for him. Tom and Rebecca repaid them by ordering everything left in the kitchen instead of choosing from the menu. Tom hung a new sign in the bar announcing that Riley's would be closing at 10 p.m. every Monday and Thursday. These days, he and Rebecca would go out to dinner, see a late movie, or go to a dance club. Each date brought them closer together. That first night opened a new chapter in Tom's life, and Rebecca became its central figure. He hired an unemployed friend to work for him on Saturday evenings. Now Tom had the whole evening and the whole day for Rebecca. They spent almost every weekend together. They had many interests in common. Tom discovered that Rebecca loved nature as much as he did. On Saturdays, they would drive out of town and stay there until the last minute on Sunday. Despite her love of camping and nature walks, Rebecca had never been fishing. She was, in essence, a city girl who had fallen in love with country life. When Tom first took Rebecca fishing, she immediately took to it. She had a little trouble casting, and Tom took a picture of her with the line draped over her shoulders like a shawl. He enlarged the photo, put it in a frame, and hung it in his office at the tavern. When things are going badly, or I'm nervous, I can look at this photo and laugh, he explained to Rebecca, who slapped him hard on the shoulder. 2 months of dating at least twice a week convinced Tom that he had found someone special. He wanted to take the relationship to the next level, but he knew he had to tell Rebecca about his past. They had just returned to his apartment after a pleasant dinner on Saturday evening. Sitting on the sofa by candlelight with a glass of wine, they began to kiss more passionately. After a few minutes, Tom pulled away and leaned back against the sofa. Tom, is something wrong with me? Rebecca asked, with a playful smile. Wrong? No, you're fine. I know you like me, and I can see that I turn you on. But why haven't you tried to make love to me yet? Tom sighed, looked at the floor for a few seconds, then shook his head. Before we go any further, there's something you need to know about my life. Tom paused, then added, Remember when we first met? I told you there was another reason I gave up my career and came back to work for Riley. Rebecca nodded, and Tom continued, Well, as they say, that's the rest of the story, and you need to know about it before we move on to a more serious relationship. Wait, Rebecca said, filling their glasses with wine. I have a feeling this is going to take a while. When she settled down on the sofa next to him, Tom began, I went to work at Dunhill right after college. It was an entry-level position, but I was attentive, a quick learner, and got a couple of promotions. I was on the rise. I saw myself as a senior vice president by the time I was 30, and then I met Stella. Tom stood up and asked, "Can we go out on the terrace?" "I need a cigar." "You don't smoke," Rebecca said, but she followed him anyway. "I smoke when I talk about Stella." He lit the cigar and took a puff. "Okay, you said you met Stella. What happened next?" Rebecca prodded Tom. She wasn't sure where he was going with this. "Stella worked for a company we did business with. We met at a few meetings, and being the youngest employees in the company, we immediately liked each other. You could say I fell in love with her during those meetings. She was smart, educated, and knew her way around the business. People listened to her when she spoke, first because she was very beautiful, and then because what she said made sense." Tom smoked his cigar for a few seconds, went into the house, grabbed a small glass of bourbon, and returned to the terrace. Stella was, and probably still is, a beauty. She's about 5 feet 8 inches, with long blonde hair and big brown eyes. If we lived in California, she would be called a beach beauty with a toned body. She was a typical blonde cheerleader, but as I said, she wasn't empty-headed. Turning to Rebecca, Tom asked, "Are you sure you want to hear this?" Rebecca nodded. "You can't stop now. I think you owe me a full explanation." Tom nodded. "Yes, I suppose I do. Anyway, Stella and I started dating. To spare you the details, we moved in together. We lived together for about a year, then got married. For 3 years, I thought we were the happiest couple on earth." Tom paused and took a big gulp from his glass. He looked at the green strip behind his house. "What changed?" Rebecca asked. Her company was an investment group, and they had a big client in California who wanted to talk to someone in person. Stella was chosen to meet with him. It was very important to her. "Sounds good for her and for you." "Yes, I thought so too, until she came home. Stella walked into the apartment, and instead of a welcome kiss, she said the words no man wants to hear from his wife or girlfriend. 'We need to talk,' she said." Tom went to refill his glass, but stopped. "Go on. What did she want to talk about?" "Stella said that the client had signed the contract but offered to double his investment if she spent the night with him. She said she turned him down." Tom smiled sadly. "Well, that's good, isn't it? I mean, she didn't go down the path of infidelity," Rebecca replied. "Yes, that's good. But she told me she turned him down not because we're married, but because she didn't want to earn a reputation as a promiscuous employee. She said she should have thought about us and our marriage, but instead, she thought about her reputation first. Stella said she thought about how an affair, even a one-time thing, would affect her career at the company, and she didn't like it. Stella asked me, 'What does this say about us and our marriage?' The next week she left and filed for divorce. We divided all our property and I was left alone." Tom leaned against the railing surrounding the patio. He stood up and said, "That's a sad story. We got divorced quickly, and she continued her career. I drifted for a year, then decided I didn't want to work there anymore and quit. There was nothing interesting left for me in that job. So I sat around for 6 months, then went back to work at Riley's." Tom looked straight at Rebecca. "I should have told you all this before. If you want to leave, I'll understand." Rebecca got up from the chair, took Tom by the hand, and led him into the bedroom. "You're not getting rid of me that easily, Mr. Larson," she said, closing the door behind her. The next day, Tom and Rebecca began moving her things to his apartment. She had sublet her apartment not because she wasn't sure she wanted to live with Tom, but because she was getting money from the new tenant. They discovered that the only thing that had changed in their relationship was that they no longer had to run between 2 apartments. Tom looked up from the bar when a ray of late sunlight entered the large room. The silhouette of a person entering was visible in the sunlight, and Tom could only make out that it was a woman. When the door closed, the light from the bar illuminated the woman's face. "Damn," Tom said quietly, recognizing the woman. It was his ex-wife, Stella. Over the years, Tom had managed to cope with the pain, anger, and regret of Stella leaving him. But seeing her for the first time since their divorce, all those suppressed and almost forgotten feelings came flooding back. Stella walked over to the bar and sat down on a stool across from Tom. "Hi, Tom. How are you?" she asked. "Good to see you." "What do you want, Stella?" "I'm in St. Louis on business and thought I'd stop by to say hello. I thought maybe we could talk." "Yeah? We don't have anything to talk about, so hi and bye, Stella." Tom tossed the towel he had been wiping the bar with into the laundry basket. "But Tom, I wanted to—" "I don't care what you want, Stella. I missed you, Tom. I thought about you a lot, wondering if I did the right thing by leaving." "Why now? Why after 3 years?" "I don't know. I've just been thinking about you a lot lately. Stella, I've moved on. I'm happy. Listen, Tom, I know I'm too late. I know I wasn't part of your plans. But I thought since I'm here, we could meet, at least for old time's sake." Tom didn't answer, just shook his head. "I'm here, and I'm a little lonely. Aren't you lonely, Tom?" Stella didn't wait for his answer. "We could spend the night together, and neither of us would be lonely." Tom just stared at her. "Let's not think about tomorrow. Let's just enjoy tonight. What do you say?" "You're a little later than usual," Rebecca said when Tom walked into the kitchen. She was finishing up the meatloaf for dinner. Tom usually came home at 7 since he hired Jerry, the new bartender. "Yeah. 2 softball teams came in after the game. Jerry was swamped, so I stayed and helped him with the first orders." Tom sat down at the kitchen table and watched Rebecca bustle around the kitchen. Rebecca turned and looked at Tom. "You seem distracted, dear. Is something wrong? Are you okay?" "Actually, everything's fine." He paused and added, "Although I had an unexpected visitor today." Rebecca looked at him questioningly. "Stella stopped by this evening." "Your ex, Stella?" "Yes." "What did she want?" Rebecca asked. Tom realized she wasn't happy that Stella had stopped by. "She said she was lonely, that we could spend the night together." Tom noticed Rebecca tense up. "She said we could spend the night together and not worry about tomorrow." "What did you say?" Tom paused and smiled to himself, making Rebecca wait for his answer. "I told her I already had a green-eyed, red-haired temptress and that there was no room in my life for another woman." "Good answer," Rebecca said. Instead of putting the meatloaf in the oven, she put it in the refrigerator. Rebecca walked over and knelt down in front of Tom. "Stella was right about one thing after all." "What?" "We have tonight," Rebecca replied, resting her head on Tom's shoulder. "Not just tonight, Rebecca. We have the rest of our lives.